Welcome to another episode brought to you by Imagine Strength, the future of safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Are you a HIIT studio owner looking for equipment that's not just top-notch, but also tailored to your specific needs? Imagine Strength is your answer. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength is revolutionizing the HIIT industry with their state-of-the-art yet affordable equipment. Their team doesn't just sell HIIT equipment, they live and breathe it. I've personally experienced their gear at the Resistance Exercise Conference, and let me tell you, it was an intense workout that I won't soon forget, in the best way possible, of course. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they provide customized solutions for HIIT studios. Number two, they have budget-friendly yet high-performance designs. And number three, they're committed to innovation and excellence in high-intensity training specifically. Founder Jeff Turner and his dedicated team are on a mission to make HIIT accessible to everyone. Getting started is easy. Number one, visit imaginestrength.com. Number two, consult with their expert team. And number three, choose the equipment that will skyrocket your business. Don't wait. Head over to imaginestrength.com and elevate your HIIT studio today with Imagine Strength. So Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for elevating your HIIT business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. This is episode 435, and my guest today is Dr. Jürgen Giessing. Long time coming. Obviously, Dr. Jürgen Giessing's been on a podcast before, but it was some time ago, so I'm excited to have him back. He is a professor of sports science at University of Landau, and after graduating from the University of Marburg with a teaching degree and a doctor's degree in pedagogy in 1997, Jürgen worked as a sports therapist and PE teacher and continued his research about muscle hypertrophy training, which led to his doctoral dissertation in sports science. And then since 2007, excuse me one second, Jürgen has been working at the University of Landau, where he continues his research about muscle hypertrophy training and its health-related effects. His first book, High Intensity Training, first published in 2006, I believe that's this one, became a bestseller in Germany. You see that? And we'll link that up in the show notes. His new book, HIIT New and Improved High Intensity Training, How to Spend Less Time and Build More Muscle, offers science-backed, time-efficient workout plans that promise optimal muscle gains, increased strength, and improved overall fitness with just 1 to 2 hours of intense exercise per week. And that's this one, which is amazing. And I highly recommend it. I've really enjoyed reading it myself. And Jürgen, welcome back to the podcast. Great to see you again.
Hi, Lawrence. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. So I had obviously done a little bit of prep for this, and then you sent me some questions, and I thought, hang on, Jürgen, your questions are way better than mine. So let's get into yours. I thought yours were really interesting. So I want to start off with the first bullet that you sent to me, which is, why do you think that high intensity training tends to be superior to volume training for long-term health?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are many reasons for that. And the most important reason being that you get, when you do high intensity training compared to high volume training, with HIIT, you tend to get most of the benefits without most of the negative sides, because muscle training, resistance training is like anything else in life. It's ambivalent, which means it has an upside and a downside. It's good and it's bad. If you do it correctly, it has more benefits than detrimental effects. So physical activity, especially intense training, is always stress for the body. And it has to be stress because we want to get the body out of its comfort zone in order to adapt. That means we have to produce a stimulus, which in this case is anaerobic of nature, and make the body adapt to that stimulus. And this kind of stress is positive because of the adaptations that we get, but it can also be negative. Because if you injure yourself, or if you, destroy something, you can have an injury. You could drop a weight on your foot or something. That's trivial. But when you compare high intensity training to high volume training, then you have, as I said, most of the benefits that you get from resistance training, or that you can get from benefits that you can get from resistance training, without the wear and tear. Because if we apply volume training, that's much more of the negative things, the negative kind of stress we put on the body. Look at your joints, your bones. They get a stimulus from both kinds of training, but the wear and tear is much more detrimental, is much more if you do a high volume training. And this is something we should avoid. We should not over train course. And so, with high intensity training, you get just the right amount of stimulus to reach or to get the desired result without the negative effects. And another thing why high intensity training is so beneficial is we have an emphasis on proper exercise execution. We try to keep the muscle fibers under time, time under tension. So we have mechanical stress. This stress is applied for a certain amount of time. And if you do it correctly, which means without momentum, without bouncing, if you include, and that is very important, an isometric part of each repetition, then you keep the tension without too much stress. And this is one of the reasons why people who switch over from high volume training to high intensity training usually realize that they have to reduce their weights, have to reduce the resistance, because they cannot train the way they used to train. They have to put more emphasis on proper exercise execution.
And there's less momentum effectively, because obviously that's the main thing, isn't it? If they're using a heavier weight before, it's because they're using momentum to help move it from A to B.
Yeah, and that's the most dangerous part, actually. That's where people, muscle tears and stuff like that, that never happens in high intensity training if you do it correctly. That always happens on the other. I mean, if you have sloppy training style, and being a scientist, I've seen I've seen several injuries in the commercial gyms where I used to work out from improper exercise execution. And we've been doing studies on high intensity training now at my university since 2007. Okay. And we have one class of students every semester who engage in high intensity training. That's usually 20 or 25 students. We've done studies with senior citizens, 60 to 80 years of age, with diabetics, with all kinds of other people. And there has never been so far, never been any injury or accident or whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because our training sessions are supervised, and we always emphasize proper technique. And if you do that, it's perfectly safe, and you get all the benefits without the kind of stress that you put your body under if you engage in high volume training.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong per se with high volume training, because several of my students, they would say they try high intensity training, they like it, and then they say, well, but I need to go to the gym every day, I need to pump iron, and then I say, that's fine. You are young, you don't have kids or anything to look after. You get this, all you do basically is train, study, eat, sleep, and sometimes party. So that's fine if you can get away with it. But for long-term success, long-term health, there comes a time when they will remember what they learned at university about high-intensity training. And I guarantee you, several of them
you're sowing seeds. You're sowing seeds.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So I'm not a missionary or something. If somebody makes nice progress with high-volume training, more power to them, that's fine. Okay. I mean, at least somebody who's doing high-volume training is at least doing resistance training, which is, that's number one thing to do if you want to stay healthy. So that's fine. But if you ask me, what's the best thing? What does science say? In the long term, something you can do until you're 80, 90. And I've talked to people, interviewed people, 92 years of age. Yeah. I've talked to a guy, old gentleman, he's training at a teaser facility. And he's 92, I think, and he still does chin-ups.
Love that.
That's great. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've had an old lady. She was over 90 too, and she could, through high intensity strength training, she was working out at Giessing as well. She could improve her bone density from her 80th birthday to her 90s something birthday. She could significantly improve her bone density.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking of a friend of mine I interviewed yesterday who is 84 years old. He's a very, very important figure in my life, business mentor, but also fitness mentor. And, but I feel like he's gone off the rails a little bit as it relates to strength training. He's still quite into, CrossFit type movements and kettlebell stuff. And he's got some joint issues and lost some muscle mass as a result of having to, stop training.
Yeah.
So even during the podcast, I kind of tried to edge him more towards, you should probably read Body by Science and start getting into this way of strength training because I've never really talked to him about it. So David, if you're listening to this, I'm gonna send you this podcast and you can listen to this and hopefully you'll try these methods. So just on what you said there, Jürgen, about the wear and tear, I find this a really interesting topic. I actually discussed this at length with John Little quite recently. And I'm just interested, from your perspective, how does that manifest? Is that primarily joint wear and tear? Is there other aspects of wear and tear that are caused by high volume training? Like, I'd love to know, like the different manifestations of wear and tear.
Yeah. The way people notice that they suffer from this wear and tear is usually one or two things. It's either an injury, like if they tear a ligament or something because they're training too heavy. Or number two is joint pain.
Mm-hmm.
Because pain. It's usually pain. It's not so much immobility in the joint or reduced mobility in the joint. It's more pain.
What about like muscle tears? Like, for instance, I remember seeing, you see these horrible clips, don't you, on YouTube that people share without thinking. And I remember seeing one where I think a chap was doing dumbbell flies and you just saw his pectoral like pop.
Yeah.
And I wondered, is that a muscle tear? What is that, firstly? And is that the result of what? Just doing too much volume, too many repetitions, too much momentum, all the above?
Most of the time, it's a combination of all these factors. But the acute event, when it happens, has to do with improper execution or with too much momentum. Because when you look at the physics of exercise, then the moment where the muscle tears or the ligament tears, that's usually the one with the most acceleration.
I see.
Usually when they're doing bench presses or flies, it's usually at the bottom part. When they're coming down, not doing the isometric part, skipping that, and directly going from the downward movement to the upward movement and trying to accelerate that. And it always gets improper, the movement, if you do that.
I see.
We've all seen that this bouncing. Usually it happens when they're bench pressing some kind. And the most dangerous thing, I've talked to an MD who is the team doctor of the German Bodybuilding Federation, and he operates on all these pec tears. And he always says, I always tell the athletes, if you have to do bench presses, don't use a barbell, use dumbbells or use a machine, because you have a problem when you use a barbell and you're using heavy weight, high volume, high resistance and everything, because you cannot change the position of your hands during the whole movement, which means that your elbows, your wrists basically can't do anything. It's your elbows and your shoulders that have to create the movement. Yeah, because bench press is just up and down movement, but our muscles rotate around joints. They're rotating basically in nature. So we have a dilemma here. And that is, and this can be solved if you take dumbbell, because then you can move your elbows, you can move your shoulder joints, you can even turn your wrists if you want. So that's a good hint for those who like bench pressing. I do, for example. But I wouldn't use a barbell. I wouldn't go near a barbell for that exercise because I'm interested in health.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that before. That's very useful to know.
I mean, if you use, don't get me wrong, if you use proper technique,
Sure.
and not too heavy a weight, that's fine.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with a barbell bench press per se.
Yeah.
It's just dangerous if you do it incorrectly, or if you're doing too much.
Yeah. Let's just make sure we clarify that. So when you say incorrect, are you saying, let's say you're almost at failure on a barbell bench press and you're trying to bounce out the bottom, but because you can't rotate your wrists, you're far more compromised because you've got you can't really displace the forces as well. Is that kind of what's happening here? I'm just trying to understand the risks associated with barbell bench press versus dumbbell bench press.
Yeah, the bench press should be executed in a way where you have proper control of the weight all the time, which means during the negative phase, you should be able to stop at any point. If somebody said, stop here, you should be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're no longer able to do that, then the execution becomes improper because then the weight is actually moving you instead of you moving the weight.
Right.
And that's dangerous. So you need to have a spotter. If you do a free weight bench press and you go to failure, you do need to have a spotter if you really want to go to failure in order to avoid those improper executions.
Yeah. All right. Got it. Okay. Shall we move on to the next point here?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got, why is there no such thing as the perfect training frequency for muscle building, Jürgen?
Yeah. From a scientific standpoint, we have all these studies, meta-analysis and that look at training frequency, and they seem to sometimes contradict each other because there are some studies that found that training a muscle more often, up to 3 times a week, resulted in a better stimulus, more muscle building and so on, than 2 or 1 stimulus per week. And then you have studies that found the opposite. Why is that? And the reason is quite easy if you look at the data, because you have to take in consideration what they were looking at. Because we have 2 things. We have, when we set a stimulus, we stimulate protein synthesis after a workout. Training is catabolic, and the reaction of the body is an anabolic one. It repairs the muscle and so on. So we get a stimulation of muscle protein synthesis. And depending on how much training experience you have, the longer you've been training, the more experience you have, the faster it goes down. So we can say that between 24 and 48 hours maximum, you get this effect of stimulation of protein synthesis. So it would be a good idea to say, okay, if we stimulate protein synthesis more often, we get more benefit. And that's exactly what those studies looked at and found. If you can stimulate muscle protein synthesis very effectively if you train the same each muscle 3 times a week. But that's not all that we have to take into consideration, because we also know that a workout which is intense enough to stimulate protein synthesis is likely to cause exercise-induced muscular damage. This micro damage that we have in the muscle fiber, and which we should not try to avoid, because it's also beneficial. It contributes to the training stimulus. And these tiny tears, this micro damage to the muscle, takes up to a full week to completely recover. So we have a dilemma here. On the one hand, it would be wise to train more often in order to stimulate more proteins, to stimulate protein synthesis more often. On the other hand, we know that we should not overtrain, and that muscle needs to recover before supercompensation sets in. And one of the problems is that most of the studies are really short-term, usually 12 weeks or something, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. And I guarantee you, if you look at long-term studies, then those who train each muscle 3 times a week will not make more progress than the others. who train only once or twice.
Right.
Because we know that overtraining takes some time to manifest itself. You can get away with high volume, high intensity if you increase it very much for a short amount of time, but in the long run you tend to overtrain then. So as I said, we have a dilemma that is somewhere between training each muscle once a week or 3 times a week. And the conclusion that I personally draw from that is play it safe. Be on the safe side. If you train a muscle every 7, 6, 5 days and you get good results, you shouldn't try to rush it, or you shouldn't try to cut down recovery time even further, or to increase frequency.
It's so interesting. So with regard to exercise,
go ahead. One more thing.
Yeah.
I think this information is really important because we sometimes tend to overthink things. Like what is the best program, and should I
best program is the one you're not doing, Jürgen, isn't it?
Yeah. That's good. And so we can relax because it's basically, if you try to put it in a positive way, you can't go wrong. If you train just once a week, that's fine. Twice a week, that's fine too. So don't overthink it.
Just on that exercise-induced muscle damage. There's a U-shape or a bell-shaped curve for that, where you've got, it varies depending on the individual, like how long it takes to recover and super compensate. So what you said there in terms of like it being about a week, is that an average? And how much does that differ between individuals, if at all?
Yeah, it depends on 2 things, which is not surprising: intensity and volume. It's a difference if you go to failure or not. If you train to failure, then the time you need for recovery is prolonged. If you do high volume, then that's even more the case. We can recover better from high intensity than from high volume. And the reason is very simple. If you're doing 1 set per exercise, let's say 10 exercises a workout or something, you cannot overtrain by training too intensely because there's muscle failure. Okay. If your personal record is 10 reps with this weight, or a time under tension of, 60 seconds, and you want to set a personal record and you're doing 68 seconds time under tension, or 12 reps instead of 10, you will not overtrain. Mm-hmm. But it's so easy to add another set. That is a great.
So what you're saying is that so what you said there, if someone's training 10 exercises, 60 to 90 second time under load, they're training to muscle failure, it doesn't sound like you think there's any value in doing another session of the same volume a week. Am I incorrect there? Is there more variables with that?
That really depends, because what we know is that recovery time is very different from individual to individual. Some people really recover faster than others. So to be honest, I cannot answer that question. Somebody saying, I've been training once a week. If you look at the studies, then the result is very obvious. Training your whole body. If you have a full body routine, then most of the people make better progress on training twice a week.
Right. Yeah.
But we never know how intense they're training, how old they are. That really depends. Yeah. And
go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, in this respect, the statistics do not tell us what we should do, or what I should do, or you should do, because let's say people need so and so many hours on average to recover. That doesn't tell you how long you need. Yeah. You don't know how long these people usually sleep, what their sleep demand is, and so on, how their nutrition is. So that's really something that you have to try to find out for yourself. And as I said, I always go by the rule, play it safe. Because what's worse, overtraining or undertraining? And that's a question that science can answer very easily. Undertraining, I mean, just means you're not doing the progress, you're not making the progress that you could be making if you trained more or more. But overtraining, when you're overtraining, you're not making any progress at all.
Right.
Yeah, you're becoming weaker and you're losing muscle if you're really overtrained.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So
So
just to clarify,
yeah, okay.
Sorry, Jürgen. And I do want to keep talking about this point. So just to clarify then, there's a lot of factors, right? If you look at the research, this is, well, on average, people can get away with training or make progress on training twice a week, but that doesn't answer what the optimal frequency of recovery is for the individual, right? Because there's so many factors. There's genetics, there's the environmental factors like sleep, hygiene, nutrition, stress levels. There's age as well, right? Which plays into recovery. Because I know people who really stand by the fact that they cannot train, more than like once a week of an all-out effort, or maybe even once every 10 days because they just don't feel like they recover. So you think that it's, to your point there, so by playing it safe, by perhaps doing a little bit less than you think you can get away with, you're probably going to make better progress over the long term. I'd just love to expand on that. What methods do you advocate for people understanding how to dial that frequency in for themselves? Like, what do you look for as symptoms of overtraining, and what advice do you have to? Because there's people listening to this who are all ages who want to maximize strength gains, maximize muscle gains, but obviously are trying to figure out what's the optimal recovery for them. So, what advice do you have there, expanding on what you just said? If there's anything else to share.
Yeah. First of all, when you're training once a week, or even when you're training twice a week, it's very unlikely that you're overtraining, even if you're training twice a week. That's for starters. But that doesn't mean that for the individual, maybe twice a week is not a bit too much. So what are the signs that you have to look for? And one is, of course, sleep quality. If you suddenly, we always say suddenly because there has to be change. If you notice that you tend to need more sleep than you used to, or that your sleep quality is not what it was, that's one. What you could do is check your heart rate first thing in the morning. Then we have HRV, heart rate variability, which is a good measure of overall health. Yeah, that's the most important one.
Got it. What about is there mood?
One more thing, people who
Go ahead.
have a lot of training experience, they can usually feel it. They will tell you, I don't know what it is, but I feel overtrained. And then say, what is it? Are you sore? They say, I don't know. I just feel it. And that's what you get after several years of experience.
Right. Okay. I remember, is it Christine Ashwandon who wrote Good to Go, on a book on recovery? She said that one of the findings was that mood was a great indicator.
Yeah.
Like morning mood, which I guess is similar to what you're saying there about a subjective sort of view on how you feel and whether you feel overtrained or not. That's interesting. Okay, so heart rate variability as well. When you talked about sleep,
another thing,
ahead.
we tend to recover better in summer than in winter. Maybe this has to do with the ultraviolet radiation or something, a serotonin or something. That's a tendency that you see when you look at that literature.
Interesting. Okay. And what about when you said there about sleep quality? What do you mean by that? Is that something that we should be using, tools to measure, like, these wristbands and Aura rings and things like that? Or how do you measure sleep quality?
You can use devices like that if they work properly. But a good rule of thumb is if you wake up and feel refreshed, that's a good sign. If you wake up and you've had the amount of sleep that you think you need, but you're still not, you don't feel recovered, you don't feel refreshed, that's a hint that you need more recovery time.
Right. That's interesting, because I definitely do not feel refreshed when I wake up right now, but that's probably more to the fact that I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Okay, yeah. I think you found the reason for that.
Well, I mean, I train maybe like 1.5 times a week at the moment, and I think that's probably good. It probably suits my season of life, shall we say. Great
Yeah,
stuff.
that's another
Good.
thing.
Yeah.
That's another thing, because training frequency is always calculated or measured in so and so many times per week, which is necessary because you need to have a reference. Okay.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with training 1.5 or 1.6 or something times a week by rotating things around. For some people, it's either 1, 2, or 3 because they need to have a fixed days. Like I train on Tuesday or something, or on Saturday because that's my day off or, from work or whatever,
Yeah.
and I have time to train. But if you can manage to, it's fine. I mean, it's perfect if you think that today is your training day, but you don't feel recovered, and say, well, I'll just train tomorrow. And if you can do that, if you have access to the equipment and if you have time, that's perfect. If you could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. So just on back on frequency. So you think
Mhm.
that most people, I know we're caveating this with everything we just said about individual differences and environmental factors that are phasic. But most people could recover from 2 full body hit style workouts, 10 to 12 exercises, 60 to 90 seconds time under load, 2 muscle failure per week. So that means obviously if you're doing, for instance, a shoulder press, which is still going to work the chest, the upper chest, a chest press, and then you're doing those same movements like 3 or 4 days later, most people can still recover from that
Mhm.
training.
Absolutely.
Everything else being equal. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one more thing that we have to take into consideration is the differentiation between systemic overtraining, which means, your organism, the whole system hasn't recovered. Yeah. Um, and local overtraining. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm still with you.
Um, because if you're doing a full body workout, it's possible also that when you're doing the next session, that your biceps, your triceps, your abs have recovered, but your lower back and your leg muscles haven't. That's something that's because systemically you have recovered. Yeah, your liver glycogen, everything is restored, um, but you still have micro tears in certain muscles, but not in others. So
Yeah.
what you could do is you're doing a full body workout, and then it's time for your next workout, and you want to work out and you feel great, but that's just, I mean, the calves or the thighs have not recovered. Then you skip that for that day and say, okay, maybe I come back tomorrow or the day after that and train my thighs.
But
Or
how do
or
you
you just
know? How do you know, for instance, like, because my understanding is that soreness is not necessarily a good indicator of this.
Yeah,
Soreness is more complicated. So how do you know if a particular muscle group hasn't recovered and to skip that?
that's a good question, which cannot be answered in a satisfactory way. But what we can say is the absence of muscle soreness does not mean is not a proof or something that you have recovered. But if you're still sore as hell, then you have not recovered. We know that.
Okay,
So
okay.
it's like a one-way street. We can use muscle soreness as an indicator when it's there, because a muscle that is still sore obviously has not recovered. And if it has not recovered, it has not supercompensated. So we should not train it again. But as I said before, the absence of muscle soreness does not necessarily mean that everything is fine.
Is this why? And I'm really excited to actually. I've just finished like a whole load of. I have an A and a B routine currently, and I've just finished, 8 workouts on each. So I've filled up a workout card. So I'm excited to dig into your new book to create my next workouts. And I'm thinking along these lines. I'm thinking about designing like another AB routine, an ABC, because that's one way of circumventing or avoiding this,
Mhm.
right? Is if you have a different workout, different emphasis on different muscle groups, then you can uh, you can what was I trying to say here? Decrease the likelihood that you'll overtrain a muscle group locally. Is that fair? Fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I always recommend to those who say, I'd like to train my whole body twice a week, then I would make the suggestion to use different exercises in workout 1 and workout 2. Like when you're doing, I don't know, a flat bench press, your first workout, then it should be an incline press, or I don't know, some other variation, just to mix things up and to hit all the motor units and muscle fibers from the different muscle
Well,
functions.
can I challenge you on that, Jürgen? So
Yeah,
obviously, if you're doing those two different types of chest exercises, you're still recruiting all of the pectoral muscles, right? So how are you then, if you do have an issue where a local that the chest isn't fully, I know chest is very vague, but isn't fully recovered, so you still got that recovery and supercompensation hasn't taken place. Wouldn't
yeah,
that then
absolutely.
be potentially a poor strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean this recommendation not in terms of avoiding overtraining, just
I see.
to vary your stimulus. In
Okay.
terms of overtraining, there's not much of a difference if you're doing bench presses twice a week, or if it's one set of bench and one set of incline bench, the other workout. That's not much of a difference. But I was thinking of muscles that have different functions, like your biceps, which, bends the elbow, which does supination and stuff like that. So if you're doing one biceps exercise and if you change that up, yeah,
Mhm.
you get to target all, muscle functions of that muscle if you vary the exercises.
Sure. Okay. So help me. So something I'm still trying to just understand here from your perspective, what we've spoken about. So I get what you're saying there in terms of training the same muscles in different ways in order to maximize recruitment and I guess provide some sort of novel stimulus potentially. But earlier on this conversation, you said, it can take up to a week for a local muscle to sort of recover, right? Now, we're still talking generally, aren't we? So the reality is that, and tell me if I've got this correct, that most people could do 2 full body workouts. They could hit the chest both sessions and still have both recovered locally and systemically. But obviously, there's plenty of edge cases. We're talking generally. Is
Yeah,
that a fair statement?
yeah, it is.
Okay.
One factor that really plays an important role is age,
Yeah.
because I'm still the same person that I used to be 30 years ago, or that I was 30 years ago. But I cannot train with the same frequency anymore. Like I used to train, I think when we last talked, I was still
You were
doing
training a
this.
lot. I
Yeah, I
remember.
was still doing each body part twice a week, and I could recover nicely from that.
Right.
But I'm not so young exactly anymore. So I've noticed that I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I've cut down to training each muscle once a week. I I usually use a split routine, so there's some kind of overlapping still, but you know, I couldn't do the same workout as the same exercise twice a week for the same muscle. It's absolutely impossible. I can't do that anymore. I mean, I could do it, but I know I can't recover from that. For example, I used to train, used to split it up like chest and back together, and 3 or 4 days later, shoulders and arms, and even that was too much.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it depends on your sleep quality and all those things that we talked about. And I mean, if I go on holiday, I know that I still am able to do that if recovery is maximized, so to speak. But what I'm trying to say is, I've noticed in myself that age is a really irrelevant factor when it comes to recovery time.
Yeah. My business partner who may listen to this, um, I used to train him and I would train him twice a week pretty hard and it just crushed him. Like he was not really having a great time and he wasn't really recovering very well from it. And then he moved to training once a week or once every 7 to 10 days. Um, and it came to me one day and was like, you were ruining me," like
Mhm.
like a half joking way. And no, he's fine. He was And honestly, I perhaps made a mistake because, I wasn't factoring in the fact that he was older and he's kind of like, sort of mid-50s, and actually perhaps needed more recovery. And I sort of, I always remained a skeptic, Jurgen. I was like, well, Sean, are you sleeping? He would go through phases of a lot of stress, a lot of business related stress. Is the diet dialed in? Um, there's other factors, right? And so, so I said there was times where I'd be skeptical of that and I'd challenge him on it. But needless to say, he's having a way better time now and feels a lot better training less for him. So obviously there's a lot of factors there that could be affecting his recovery, but I suspect age could be a big one, or genetics or whatever. So that was a big learning curve for me. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but that's exactly what you do.
yeah,
You always have to apply some trial and error.
yeah,
Because I wouldn't say that your original concept was wrong. Training intensely twice a week, that's fine for many people, and you
yeah,
just have to try it.
yeah. This is great. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So let's move on to the next one, shall
Mhm.
we? So you wrote here, why statements like everybody is different, we're all individuals lead many trainees into the wrong direction. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, because I hear that a lot. That when first of all people ask, "What's the science behind this or that? What does science? Uh, what's the insight that we can get from that?" And then people say, well, science is one thing, but you have to look at this bodybuilder or that bodybuilder. He trains like this and he trains like that. And everybody's different. Of course, everybody's different. We are all individuals. However, we are all the same physiologically. I mean, there are certain physiological rules of nature that apply to all of us. Very simple example, if we expose our skin to ultraviolet radiation, we will get a tan or burn or whatever. But how long that takes, how much we can tolerate, how tanned we will be in the end, that all depends on, that's different. If you're black and white and whatever, there's huge differences. And it's the same with training. Yeah, we're all the same. If we set the training stimulus, we need to give our muscles recovery time to adapt, nutrition, amino acids, replenish glycogen. We're all the same. That does not mean that we can train, that we can do all the same exercises, that we can recover equally well, that we will build the same amount of muscle, because it's very simple. The more muscle fibers you have, the more muscle growth you will have. Yeah. And we're talking about differences of hundreds of thousands muscle fibers. Yeah. So, as I said, sometimes this argument, everybody's an individual, and science says this, and but you may be different. Yeah, you may be different in terms of you need an extra day of recovery, or you need, I don't know, not 1.5 grams of protein, you need 1.7. That's maybe, yeah, that's possible, but you still need protein. You still need to recover. We are all the same. So let's not use this argument of being individual to just wipe away everything that we know. Just realize that there's a variation in everything, okay? And that a training program worked for the current Mr. Olympia does not mean that it will work equally well for somebody else.
Yeah.
And usually those people who will tell you, forget about science, everybody's different, they're using this argument because they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you some kind of training program or a supplement. Yeah, science says people only need so and so much protein, but everybody's different. You might need 5 grams. And by the way, I've got a nice protein powder that I could sell you. That's how it works usually.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful not to do that. Yes, everybody is an individual, but we are all the same. We are all Homo sapiens, and we have the same physiology, basically. That doesn't mean that we can all be 6'5", 300 pounds. No, but you will be some pounds and a certain length. That we're all the same.
Yeah, unfortunately, guys, we can't all be 6'5" and be as shredded as Jurgen. That's just Back to
Yeah.
reality.
The thing is, you can be big and natural, then you're not shredded. Or you can be shredded and natural, then you're not big.
Yeah.
Or you can be big and shredded, but then you're not natural.
Very good.
And I'm natural, so I have to decide between being shredded or being huge. And I choose shredded because that's for my health. That's the better option.
So this is interesting. So you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, weren't we? And I said I was watching some YouTube videos of you, and it was the first time I'd sort of seen your frame, on video. And you were doing some content with, I think, a pretty popular German bodybuilder, I think. And I noticed that obviously you have got a slim build. I mean, you look fantastic. You look healthy, and you're very tall. And you said there about how you've been big in the past. Can you talk about that a bit more? And is that just simply you were just eating more and just had more muscle, but obviously with more muscle comes more fat as well? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I was young. I was 20, beginning of my 20s.
Yeah.
And I had been doing high volume training like everybody else, because when I was a teenager, we didn't know anything about high intensity training. And when I discovered high intensity training and switched from high volume to high intensity, I gained more than 20 pounds. And I've always been quite lean. But then I liked that actually. When I was young, I really enjoyed being big and muscular and everything. But when you get older, the emphasis changes. And now my emphasis is on health. When I was trying to really increase muscle mass, I ate a lot. I ate more, and I watched my protein intake all the time. And I think I was still eating meat at that time, which I'm not anymore for health reasons. I know
For
that
health
is
reasons,
controversial.
Yep. Yeah. Well, do you mind elaborating on that for a moment? We don't need to spend too much time on that, but I'd love to hear your rationale for eliminating meat.
Yeah, basically the change I made going vegetarian was more for ethical reasons. I really felt sorry for the animals. That was number one, because honestly, there's nothing wrong with eating meat. I mean, if it's organic and if it's if the animals have been treated well and everything, there's no problem if you eat. I mean, if you don't overdo it. If you eat meat once in a while, or if meat is part of your diet, that's fine. That's fine. I've got nothing against it, but for me, it was more ethical.
Understood. Okay. Sorry, I digression a little bit there, but so okay, so you were eating more, you were more muscular. Was that the only variable that was different to now? And the protein intake, obviously.
Yeah, and I deliberately cut down on aerobic training, because I had been when I was in my teens and even later up, I think I played football, soccer until I was in my early 20s, and practice twice a week, then a match on Sundays. That was really that was a lot, and so I didn't. That kept my weight down. And when I skipped playing football and concentrated more on high intensity strength training, I gained a lot.
So what was the delta in terms of what you weigh now versus what you used to weigh, for instance?
I usually don't weigh myself, because what I'm doing now is I monitor my body fat percentage.
Sure.
And I do that once a week, and I can. Last week I was 7 point something body fat.
That's very good.
And I try to keep it in the single digits. And I have not been out of that range for several years now. And I've experimented with that. I've gone as low as 6% body fat, but that's too hard on me. I don't feel good when I do that. I feel best when it's between 7 and 8 or 9. I feel really great.
Yeah.
If my percentage of body fat increases, I don't feel so well.
So when you were younger and you were at your largest, what were you body fat percentage wise then?
It was measured once back then, and it was, I think, 15%.
Okay. Okay. And you
14
were,
or 15 or something.
was it quite a significant difference in the way you look in terms of were you much sort of bulkier or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah. I've just got what I'm trying to understand it because I think a lot of people criticize HIIT because they think, especially people who are more kind of like advocates of high volume, and they think higher volume will lead to more muscular size. I know you're basically saying the opposite. You're saying when you switch to HIIT, you actually gain more muscle, and with the addition of a higher caloric intake, you were able to increase your size, but also increase your body fat along with that. Um, I mean, I'm the same as you. I mean, I really have very little. I mean, this could change, but where I'm at in life, I want to optimize my health span and improve my longevity where possible, if that's even possible. Because I'm thinking more about my children. I'm thinking about their children, and the long term of my life,
Mhm.
and I want to optimize for that. I want to decrease the risk of cancers and all sorts of different
Mhm.
things. I can
Good
get you.
point.
So that would be more important to me. I'm not saying I don't care about obviously the aesthetic. I certainly do. Right? I like to try and look good as well. And there may come a point in the future where things are certainly, for instance, getting a little bit easier with kids now, and there's a little bit more time and energy. Where I start to kind of like see if maybe if I can increase my caloric intake by a small amount, would that result in more muscle gain? Because for me, I feel like I've just kind of plateaued now, in terms
Mm.
of for a long time now, and maybe there's time. I mean, I don't measure anything. I don't even measure body fat. I measure nothing right now, really. So there's maybe I'm making tiny marginal improvements on like a monthly basis at this point, but I don't really know. So
Yeah, but that's great. If you're doing tiny improvements, but you're improving in terms of building muscle, that's fine. This whole concept of bulking up and slimming down is very controversial, and there are a lot of arguments against it, a lot of disadvantages. But one word of caution is this: I increase my calories in order to gain more muscle. This seems to work very well for young people, especially people in their 20s or something. But when you have people 50, 60, 70, it doesn't work like that anymore. I don't know why. Protein synthesis seems to plateau at a certain point. And if you increase calories further than that, you just get fat. And I've seen that with, no. I've seen that with several
I don't deny it. Yeah.
several subjects in our studies, people who are giving advice to, when they were trying, I need more muscle, I need to bulk up, or I need to increase my calories. For people a certain age, this doesn't work anymore. They just get fat.
Wow.
And
You know what?
if I did that, what I did 30 years ago, increase my calories, try to bulk up, I would get fat. I think I've tried it once or
Yeah.
twice, really upping my calories, and it did nothing. It did not speed up muscle building, but it resulted in fat increase. So you have to be careful. But somehow the human body seems to. We know that protein synthesis is also relying on energy from food sources. It's not only the protein you eat. If you are in a surplus diet, especially for young people, it's easier to gain muscle. But
Right.
as I said, what we've seen in our studies is it doesn't work as well for older people. So my advice is, when you're old, watch your don't go in a calorie deficit too much. Watch your protein intake, but don't overdo it in terms of calories, because
Yeah.
you will end up being fat.
Today's episode is sponsored by Imagine Strength, the game changer in safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training machines. When it comes to HIIT, Imagine Strength is your go-to for intelligently designed, efficient, and affordable equipment. Their team is passionate about HIIT, and it shows in every piece they craft. So why are Imagine Strength the right choice? Number one, they tailor-make their equipment for HIIT studios. Number two, they provide cost-effective solutions for your business. And number three, they are committed to ongoing innovation and refinement. Ready to take your HIIT business to the next level? Visit imaginestrength.com to discuss your needs and find the perfect gear for your studio. Join the HIIT revolution of Imagine Strength and transform your workout experience today.
Let's go.
Do you know what? This is obviously the 435th episode, I believe, Jürgen, and I just do not stop learning something new. That is something I didn't really know at all, and how that would change as we get older. And that's really fascinating, actually. Really interesting stuff. So I wanted to move on to just talking about cardio, or I know, and I'm guessing you use the word cardio to be a bit more friendly to a layman audience, because we would typically say like steady state, wouldn't we, in our space? But just not that matters at all. But the question you had here is why, or the statement is, why cardio is not necessarily detrimental to muscle growth, and why, if done correctly, and it can even contribute to more muscle growth. This is fascinating to me. So please elaborate on that. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Sometimes people who are trying to gain muscle are very reluctant to also do some kind of endurance training, steady state which is basically aerobic exercise. And there's a good reason, because if you're overdoing it, you will, if you're training like a marathon runner, you will end up looking like one. There's no way around that. And this is because there is a thing called SAID, specific adaptations to impose demands, which means your body adapts to what you want from it, what you stress on, kind of stress you put it on. And we have to differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic exercise, and resistance training is anaerobic in nature, which means that it uses different energy sources, which leads to different kinds of adaptations, which is strength increase, muscle hypertrophy, and so on. They used to tell people not to do any endurance or steady state activity at all. And that's not necessarily a good advice, because you can improve your overall health and even your high intensity training if you're doing a little bit of steady state. What does science say? We have so many studies that are trying to find out how little exercise you need in order to get a measurable result, a significant result. And when you look at endurance training, steady state, aerobics, it's very simple. It's about 10 minutes a day. That's all you need, or maybe 60 hours a week. And that's not much. We're not talking about
6 hours.
Here.
Did you say?
No,
sorry.
No, 60 minutes.
60 minutes. Sorry.
Did I say 6 hours?
I think you may have.
God, no. Oh no. No, we have to delete the whole episode. That's I don't want people to do that. Sorry, 60 minutes a week, 10 minutes a day. And that's very simple to get in. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why the famous Cooper test by Kenneth Cooper, who tries to test aerobic capacity, is 12 minutes, because 12 minutes is 10 minutes plus a safety margin. Because he found out that you don't have to let people run for 90 minutes to test their endurance capacity. 10 minutes is enough. And so he chose 12 minutes. So if you do that, let's say a tiny amount of steady state aerobic activity, then you improve certain things. You increase the number of your red blood cells, your maximal oxygen consumption increases. Cardio training is beneficial. Your heart becomes stronger. Your resting heart rate decreases, for example. And that has a lot of beneficial effects on overall health, but it also makes you it enables you to train harder. Because when we're doing high intensity exercise or resistance training, what we're looking for is muscular exhaustion, muscular failure. We don't want to stop. If we have to stop doing the exercise like squats or leg presses or whatever it is, because of cardiovascular exhaustion, because we cannot continue the exercise any longer, that's not what we want. We want to be able to reach muscular failure, which is no problem on biceps, for example, or triceps exercise. But when we're training huge muscle groups, it's a different story. Another thing is you recover faster between sets and between workouts. And another thing we want to be able to do is like when you're doing 10 exercises or 8 exercises or whatever, you still want to be able to train the last exercise of your workout with the sufficient amount of intensity, sufficient degree of intensity. So some aerobic conditioning helps us to do all that. It's better health-wise, and we recover faster. We can train harder. So it has a lot of benefits. We have to be careful not to overdo it. It's just a supplement to high intensity training. It shouldn't be a substitution or whatever.
Okay. So 10 minutes a day, what does that look like in terms of the actual exercise?
Doesn't matter. It could be fast walking even. It could be, running, swimming, cycling. It can even be that there are some studies that call it the sandwich method, which means if you can't do 30 minutes, just do 10 minutes 3 times, intersped with something else, or even 5 minutes, then another 5 minutes, then another 5 minutes. Like it adds up. All you have to do is get your heart rate into the training zone, which is 65-70% of your maximum heart rate. Mm-hmm. As I said, this can be using
which zone is that? Is that zone? What's that? Zone 3, zone 4? What is that?
I don't know. I don't use these categories usually.
That's okay.
Yeah. I always use percent of maximum heart rate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so the sandwich method, what do you mean by that? So what you're doing, so let's say we take 10, 10, 10. So we're doing one activity for 10 minutes, then a different one for 10 minutes, and another one for 10 minutes.
You can do that. No, what I meant is if you don't have 10 minutes without a break, let's say I go for a run for 30 minutes. If you don't have time for that, it could be, I don't know, riding your bike to work for 10, 15 minutes, then fast walk in your lunch break for another 10 minutes, and then riding the bike home for another 10 minutes. Then you have 30 minutes.
Okay.
And this adds up actually.
Okay. So you've got to obviously pick up some of the intensity if you want to. This isn't like, like Peter Attia is very popular right now for popularizing zone 2, which would be lower intensity than this. 60 to 75% of heart rate would be a bit more intense, not obviously maximum intensity, but a bit more intense in terms of the given activity. So we just need to make sure we're maintaining that for, at least 10 minutes a day is what you're saying. Is that right?
Yeah. But you could also, as you said, go lower with the intensity, but prolong the time. If you're walking at a very low intensity, then it should be a bit longer. The duration should be longer when the intensity is lower too. The duration should be longer if the intensity is lower.
Why do you think, there's obviously a lot of people within the high intensity training space who just, don't think there's any requirement for additional aerobic cardio style training, that, high intensity training in of itself is going to deliver a stimulus to your cardiovascular fitness. It's going to use both the anaerobic and aerobic pathways concurrently, because it will be stimulated to a degree. Obviously your heart rate will increase. Why do you think there is this prevalence in our space, especially in, I would argue, the more purist kind of high intensity training camp, that there isn't much value or any value in adding? I've just obviously had to go down the stairs and run back up again, and I'm already a little bit out of breath, which says maybe I need to do more aerobic work. But yeah, so what's your take on that? Do you think they're missing a trick? Do you think but it sounds like the science supports that we should do something based on what you're saying there.
Well, first of all, they're basically right, because we have been told for many decades that resistance training does absolutely nothing for your aerobic conditioning, that it's even detrimental. You always, all these misconceptions about resistance training, and that's wrong. because resistance training, especially if it's high intensity, does indeed have an effect on training your aerobic system, because basically what we do is when we force the body to switch from aerobic to anaerobic energy production, we are building up the so-called oxygen debt. That means the body's the cardiovascular system is still trying to push blood and oxygen into the biceps, but it's not taking any because it's contracting so hard that the blood vessels won't let the blood through. And then when you stop the exercise after reaching failure, this whole process is reversed. And then it's, I don't know the English expression. That means you switch from anaerobic to aerobic, and then you get indeed an aerobic training effect with corresponding adaptations. However, we know that if you do aerobic activity in addition to that, then this will increase decrease your heart rate more than just resistance training does. And it will strengthen your heart, and it has several advantages, but it's not like you're not getting any aerobic effect if you're only training anaerobically. That's not, now we know that they told us decades ago is wrong. So I can understand those people who say you do not necessarily need aerobic training. In a way, they are right. But my take is you can still get a little benefit if you're using some cardiovascular exercise, if you're not overdoing it. Because if you're doing it, we see a lot of negative effects like a drop in testosterone and burning too much muscle glycogen and stuff like that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, this makes sense to me now. Yeah, I know what you were saying there about the pyruvate and the lactate being metabolized after strength training and how that has like an aerobic effect. I think that's what you was explaining there. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, okay. So
I mean, that's something that I'm explaining in the book also, that if you're doing resistance training exercise, that we'll still get at the same time, just through your resistance training, your high intensity exercise, you will still get aerobic conditioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's hard to believe for some people. They say, "Oh no, it gets worse. It gets worse. My aerobic."
Well, they quickly change their minds when you put them to failure on a leg press, Jürgen.
Oh yeah, okay, that's true. True.
But I've been so guilty of being quite dogmatic about HIIT in the past and saying that you don't need to do any. I've never been one of those people who said don't do any cardio, don't do anything in addition. Because you're a fit recovery. I never quite believed that, because I know that's obviously some people were like that. But I've always been I've always said things like, oh, you don't need to because you're going to get everything you need here. But that's not necessarily true. That if you want to optimize, as you've been saying, and I've explored this actually on a number of podcasts recently with our colleagues in here. And you've already just literally describe the other benefits that you might get from that modality. So if you're looking to optimize your health, then it does pay to do both. Now, obviously, there's nuance to this. If you've got for instance, in the strength training or the fitness industry, a lot of our clients in here are people that do nothing, right? So they're time crunch. They're busy professionals a lot of the time. The 30-minute HIIT work once a week, twice a week is perfect for them. And so just getting them doing something, the strength training is obviously probably going to be the best return on time, because it's going to have some aerobic benefit, but then it's going to give all the other benefits in terms of strength and muscle mass and metabolic health, etc. But many of the people listening to this podcast, whether you're a HIIT business owner or a trainer or a HIIT enthusiast or a fitness enthusiast, most of us, I would argue, are passionate about optimizing our health. And if that means that doing 10 minutes of this type of activity as well, as often as you can on a daily basis, is going to really help one optimize their overall health.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. If somebody only has 30 minutes a week, ask me what to do, I would tell them to do high intensity resistance training. Use all of these 30 minutes to do a HIIT workout, not 15 minutes of HIIT and 15 minutes of cardio or something. No. If you have more time than that, then it might be worth considering doing some cardio or some aerobic activity. I mean, sometimes it's easy to integrate into your daily life by just walking instead of driving, or getting off the bus one station early and walking the rest, or something like that. That's so simple.
Yeah. It's really either a bit of an illuminating experience recently. I mean, I used to be like a chronic cardio guy, right? So I used to do too much, and I did strength training as well, but I was just overtrained. I was very, very skinny, very, very lean. And my resting heart rate was like a 48, right? Or even less than that, I think. And then recently I had another checkup, and I had like just a, what you call it, like a overall kind of health checkup type of thing. And my resting heart rate, and this could, there could be factors like, what do they call it? White coat syndrome or whatever, where you go into a doctor's kind of stressed out. My resting heart rate was like somewhere between 60 and 70. And I was like, that's really different to what it used to be. And to be honest, like all I do really in terms of exercise now is I walk the dog, try to do that every day. But that's obviously very low intensity. And then I do strength training like 1.5 times a week, I guess. It's funny, I see people obviously running, and I have this like cognitive dissonance, because I always thought, that's probably adding no value and they're just damaging their knees. But there's a primal part of me that's like, I miss that. I used to do that all the time, and I kind of miss doing that. So it's actually quite exciting for me, because I kind of want to do more of this stuff. Like I used to play basketball a lot, and then I had kids, and then that became difficult. And obviously basketball is a difficult one because it's there's a very high likelihood of injury, right? So it's not something I know if I want to go back to doing at a competitive level. So I was just, I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that, like that difference in resting heart rate. I mean, I don't know if that's truly meaningful based on what I said there about maybe the situation. But also it got me thinking, maybe I could improve that and incorporate this. It sounds like I've got nothing to lose if I just start incorporating 10 minutes a day. I mean, I've got the time to do it now. So
what you could do is you choose another day to go for a fast walk or something for 30 minutes or something, and just try it. And I think it will make a difference, because what you said, resting heart rate of 48 and 68, that is a difference. That's also a difference in your high intensity workouts, because what do you think of? Usually when we're at muscle failure, if we're training large muscle groups like the back, legs, chest, we are at maybe 90% of our maximum heart rate. Now, your maximum heart rate is mostly defined by your age, because it decreases with age. And if your resting heart rate goes up, then you have less margin to adapt. You know what I mean? Because your heart rate goes up when you're training. While you're doing your set, the closer you get to failure, the more it gets up. Now, starting from 20 beats per minute above where you usually were, that is the difference. So if you can get your resting heart rate back down, I'm sure this will increase the kind of intensity that you will be able to apply to your resistance training workouts.
Fascinating. Yeah. And by the way, just for clarity, I don't think it was 68. I think it was quite that high. It was more like, in fact, I think it was more like between 50 and 60. Okay. I can't actually remember now, but it was still, it was still
really good.
Higher.
That's still really good.
But it was still significantly higher. And maybe I shouldn't take too much stock in it, but I am definitely going to start implementing some of these changes regardless, I think.
Maybe you should get a greyhound dog.
Yeah,
I don't know what kind of a dog you have now.
Well, that's funny you should say, because I have a little rat terrier. She's like a small Jack Russell, and she's old. She's old, and she's got a pulmonary embolism.
Oh, okay.
So if she does any like really intense activity, she coughs quite violently, and we don't know how long she has, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But otherwise, she's fine. She'll go up and down the stairs, and she wanders around, and we take her for walks every day still. But yeah, anyway, needless to say, I can't break into a sprint with her anymore. So I used to, obviously. I used to love just racing the dog and that kind of thing. So Jürgen, I hope you don't mind. I thought we'd run over a little bit because a
Mhm.
few more questions I want to ask you as well. Let me just see about the cardio. You kind of answered most of the questions I had about that, actually. Yeah, I think we're all good there. Um, oh yeah, let me ask you about this. So just in terms of like programming, I know again this is a very individual thing, but do you have any recommendations on how one might, set up their week in terms of, let's say, give you the example where you got someone like myself. I've got pretty good flexibility. I could do this every day probably. I don't have too many constraints on my time. So what would be ideal in terms of my overall training for the week, in terms of both resistance training and cardio?
Well, you said your goal is optimize well-being, health,
Absolutely.
and
That's number one.
and improving on muscle mass and strength.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I before I could answer that question, I would have to know how you're training now.
Okay. So currently I train full body. I try and train full body like 1.5 times a week, right?
Mhm.
So I'll train on a Tuesday, I'll go to the studio and we have medics.
Yeah, great.
And I'll try and do like a full body workout. And at the very least, I might do 5 or 6 movements, but I'll make sure there's like a big 5 in there for the most part, leg
Mhm.
press, pull down, chest press, etc. And then my other workout is always a home-based workout. So it's all body weight. It's like chin-ups, pike push-ups, standard push-ups, rows on a suspension trainer, maybe dumbbell work for shoulders like lateral raises. And then it would be a sequence of split squats into goblet squats and a wall sit for legs. Although I never train legs as intensely as I would on a leg press because I personally find it so hard to get to muscle failure
Mhm.
without a leg press
Absolutely,
on
yeah.
the legs.
That's a problem, really.
For obvious reasons. But I mean, that in an ideal world, I'm training Tuesday in the studio and then Friday at home. But what I've found lately, because we've had a lot of sickness in our house because our kids are so young, they're always
Mhm.
bringing bugs back from daycare. So there's constantly sickness. And so if I'm feeling a bit, under the weather, I will only train like once that week or not at all. Um, and so, yeah, hence where the 1.5 comes from. Probably over
Okay.
the course of 6 months, it's probably like 1.5. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then it's just walking the dog for 10 or 15 minutes every morning. And then obviously I spend a lot of my time sat in front of a laptop. I'm probably way more sedentary than I'd like to be. And although there is a lot of, I would argue that being a parent, there's a ton of like, there is a lot of like other strength and cardio work because you're constantly picking kids up, you know, and getting kids dressed and all that, which actually can be quite exhausting. But yeah, that's my lifestyle. I don't know if that really answers the question. Hopefully, that gives you something to work with.
Mhm. And the reason why you're doing one workout at home and not both in the gym is it's convenience that you need to
It's
get to the
it's
gym?
it's convenience, yeah. The
Okay.
gym is the other side of town, so it's a traffic thing. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what it
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you feel you recover well between workouts?
Uh, at the moment I'm not so sure just because I'm not waking up fresh as a daisy, Jurgen. I'm definitely waking up with some, oh good. Type
Yeah.
reaction. But
So
that's
you
probably less to do with overtraining and more to do with maybe other life stresses and overall sleep, quality and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because I'm overtraining. I don't think that's a likelihood based on my, 1.5 times a week. I don't know. I don't think I think it's unlikely I'd be overtraining. I mean, I'm 36 years old, yeah, so that's my belief.
Mhm. Well, it's a pretty good training program that fits into your schedule very well.
Yeah.
One thing I would
But I
suggest
think
is
I
that
could throw in. I think I could. What I'm saying is, like, where would you squeeze in the cardio? Just like
okay.
every day that I'm not resistance training, just do some sort of like aerobic activity. Yeah,
Now,
sorry,
what I
go
would
ahead.
do is when you're out anyway walking the dog, then it's very easy to just walk a little further than you would
Mhm.
have to actually just extend it or I don't know, increase the tempo a little bit, or just, using what you're doing anyway, just trying to improve a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe
That's
I'll
what I
pick her up.
would
I'll pick up the dog so
Yeah.
she can keep up.
Yeah,
I'm messing.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah. Put her in one of those little baby holders that you wear on the front,
The neighbors would be wondering what you're doing.
Yeah, they'll think I'm a total lunatic. Okay, so I guess where I'm sort of getting out of this, it's like I could probably do this stuff, 60 to 75% of my heart rate type activity every day, and that would be fine, given my current setup.
Yeah, because as I said, you're out anyway. That's a great chance you have. When you're walking the dog anyway, then you can turn it into exercise.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Got it. All right. Just trying to think. I'm just also thinking 60 to 75% of heart rate. That seems to me a little bit more intense.
It doesn't have to be.
I see.
Adaptations start when you're as low as 50%.
Okay.
So you don't have to go that high. If you have a feeling that this is too intense for you, you don't have to do that.
Okay. All right. And what would that be? Sorry, heartbeats per minute. What would that be? 60, 75% on average. Do you know?
For your age, 200.
Oh, you can get this charts for this, isn't there? I can Google this.
Yeah. You have to
do that.
The rule of thumb is you subtract your age in years from 220.
Right.
So for you, that's 180 something. That's your max.
184. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's the 100%. 220. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, that's one reason why, if people never do any exercise, if they don't resistance train and don't do aerobic exercise, they have a problem in the end, and when they are old, because they get sarcopenia and everything that you don't get if you do resistance training. But another problem they get is cardiovascular problems, because the older you get, the more your maximum heart rate goes down. But if you're not exercising, your resting heart rate goes up. So that means you have only a tiny margin of adaptation. I mean, if you're walking up the stairs, you're pretty much doing an all-out workout.
Yes.
That's why many old people have problems, getting things done.
Yeah.
And have to end up have to go to some kind of senior citizens residence, because they can't walk up to their flat. That's really a problem, though. I mean, this is not news for you, that the older someone gets, the more important it is to work out and to train.
Yeah, 100%. No, I completely agree with that. Obviously,
one more word of caution: if you wait too long, then it may be too late. We've done this study with 60 to 80-year-old people who had never done resistance training in their life, and they still make great progress in terms of strength, muscle mass, and bone density. However, there was the oldest subject in that study. He was over 80 when we started. He was the only one who did not gain any muscle at all. And one possible explanation is that too many of his muscle fibers had already deteriorated.
Right.
Because use it or lose it, because some of, especially the fast twitch muscle fibers, tend to decrease when you're older.
And the nuclei with that, right? Which
exactly,
I know that muscle memory effect you talk about in the book, about how it can actually last. That nuclei can last up to 15 years or longer.
Yeah.
Which I thought was fascinating. Yeah. So hence why people can bounce back so powerfully. But like you say, if you go a long stretch of time, many decades about it, and then you end up being, an old age, it can be much harder.
Yeah, for somebody who is over 80 and hasn't trained his whole life, he doesn't have, the muscle has no memory because there's nothing that it can remember.
Yeah.
The muscle has never been strong and big. And if you haven't used a muscle fiber for 80 years, then there's no need for the body to keep that.
Okay.
So that's important information for your customers, for the people who work in that area.
Yeah.
Tell people they shouldn't wait too long.
A lot of people listening to this work with that that sort of demographic. So can we segue into talking about diabetes?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you and I believe, talked about this study in the membership a long time ago. And so, it's fine to talk about it again here. And that study was the effects of adding high intensity of effort resistance training to routine care in persons with type 2 diabetes, an exploratory randomized comparative interrupted time series study. I really thought the study design on this was excellent, by the way. But did you want to talk about that study specifically, or did you just want to talk generally more about what you have learned in terms of how high intensity training helps to prevent and sometimes even cure diabetes?
Yeah. Just one word concerning the study. It was or it still is a long-term study. We started this experiment more than 10 years ago and have published some of the results, but the experiment is still going on if you want. Some of the former diabetics still train. It was a study in which we had two groups of type 2 diabetics. They all had the same kind of education concerning nutrition and everything. They all were monitored by their doctors. And one group did resistance training, high intensity training twice a week, and the others didn't. And what we saw is that the high intensity training group improved in every aspect in terms of strength, muscle mass, well-being, daily activities and everything. But
like waist circumference, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
Body fat. But also their diabetic condition became better up to a point where several of the subjects did not need to take insulin anymore. So they had basically been cured. This works only with type 2 diabetics because type 1 cannot be cured. And that's very, nowadays we know that. But more than 10 years ago, we were asking ourselves, why do they always recommend cardio exercise for diabetics and walking, but never resistance training? Because the thing is, we have only two places where we can store glycogen, which is sugar basically in the body. And one is the liver, which has a very limited capacity. And the other way, or the other part of the body where you can store glycogen is your muscles. And this is basically unlimited. The more muscle you have, the more glycogen you can store. And so that's what led to the improvements. By improving their muscle mass, they could store more glycogen, needed less insulin, and so on. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we have come to realize, that indeed resistance training helps to improve and helps to prevent diabetes. Now, one thing I would like to mention is several people said, okay, you recommend high intensity training. Why do that? And I said, okay, because it's easy to do two workouts. It's intense. The higher the intensity, the more glycogen you burn. It's only once or twice a week. In the study we did twice a week, but if they do once a week now, that's fine as well. It's only once a week. That means you can do that your whole life. You always have the time to work out once or twice a week, so it's convenient and you will continue that. And then some people say, yeah, but if muscle training burns glycogen, why should we not then do high volume training? Because if you do, let's say, 10 sets per muscle per exercise, that burns more glycogen than only one. And I say, well, that's right. If you only look at one point of the equation, F1 part, because what we burn during exercise. But the other aspects is, how much do we store? How much do we eat? So this is the old problem. Why should we? I mean, you cannot compensate overeating by overtraining. So we have to look at both sides of the equation. Yeah, you have to eat appropriately, and you have to train in a way that makes sense. And the way that makes most sense is high intensity training, even for diabetics. And yeah, that's some kind of misconception I always get. And if high intensity training is good for diabetics, then volume training would be even better. And it doesn't work like that.
And you think there's like a law of diminishing returns for like glycogen depletion, basically, with the training as well. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're saying as well?
Yeah. And the thing is, if you overtrain, if you're doing too much volume, then glycogen resynthesis is impaired.
Okay. Just why is that?
I don't know.
I love your intellectual honesty. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. I've talked to a colleague who specializes in enzymes and stuff like that. And he says it's very complicated. If we do a set to failure, then we know that this changes at least 300 different enzymes in our bloodstream.
Oh, wow.
And frankly, I didn't know that there are so many at all.
This is a really good example of Dunning-Kruger, isn't it? You know, when you you learn, like, you're already so knowledgeable, and then you learn even more about something very specific, and you realize there's this whole or chasm of stuff we don't know, right? Or you know, maybe your colleague know a little bit more because they specialize in that space, but fascinating. Yeah. Good stuff.
By the way,
all right. Yeah, go ahead.
That's another reason why overtraining is so detrimental, because glycogen replenishment is impaired.
Right. Okay.
And that's something that I learned only recently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything else that you care to say or want to say in relation to high intensity training and prevention or cure of diabetes? Or I know we covered that pretty kind of briefly there, and obviously the listeners can go and check out the study if they want to read the paper in detail. Is there anything else you want to share on that?
Yeah, just one sentence. If somebody has a problem with diabetes or tries to prevent diabetes, then it might be a good idea to do your workout at the end of the fasting period, when glycogen is low anyway. Because if you haven't eaten for a long time, especially carbs, and I haven't eaten carbs, and if you're training, then as a result of that, all the glycogen all the glucose that is in your bloodstream is most likely being taken up by the muscles post-workout. So that's a very good way to get to reduce blood glucose by pulling it into muscle cells.
Got it. Okay. And that comes on to that's your next point here about why working out on an empty stomach is a good idea, is for that reason.
Yeah, that's exactly the reason.
Yeah. Okay. So if one is also trying to, I guess, optimize fat loss, that's going to certainly help with that by training in that way, in your opinion. Is that correct? Or are we talking about something different?
That is correct.
Yeah.
As long as you are in a negative energy balance. If you train fasted, there will be fat mobilization, you will burn fat. But if you eat too much after that, then you will put it back on. So yes, it's a great way to burn fat, but only if your energy balance is correct.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds absolutely fine.
So there's one thing. There's one occasion where you should not train on an empty stomach, and that is when you want to break the world record, or if you want to set a personal record or something, because then your glycogen stores should be full as possible, of course. Yeah, but I'm talking about training. What is a good time for your training?
Yeah, appreciate that nuance. So last thing I want to ask you really is, before we start wrapping up, is just your own kind of training, like routine and schedule, because I think the listeners always find that fascinating. Like, what does Jürgen do? What's his strength training routine? What does his steady state like schedule look like? And how do you manage that in your day to day? Would love to get a view on that, if that's okay.
Okay. First of all, I really love training first thing in the morning. And second thing, first thing is my coffee.
Of course.
Because then,
Pre-workout.
yeah, exactly. Because if I do that, then I know that I have accomplished my goal. And I find it very frustrating if you work the whole day and then you work so long that you have to skip your workout. So I try to do that first thing in the morning when there are no distractions. And it depends. I try to strength train twice a week or 3 times. If I split, then I do what I'm trying to do at least is one upper body workout per week and one lower body workout per week.
Mhm.
And when I'm training at home, I have to use free weights. And when I'm training in a gym or at university's gym, I have great machines that I can use, including an old Nautilus pullover machine. And why I think that this exercise is so great, I covered that in the book, because this was really a revolutionary thing that Arthur Jones came up with in terms of biomechanics and muscle function and everything. So whenever I get the chance to train on the Nautilus pullover machine, I will do that. And since we have that in the university's gym, I use that once a week. So basically, I'm trying to do at least once a week upper body, once a week lower body, and then I run once or twice a week.
And how long do you run for?
Usually 8 kilometers. So
And how
5
long's that?
miles or something.
Yeah, how
5
long's that
miles or
taking?
something. Well, I take my time. I don't use a pulse monitor or something. I just go.
And what is that, like 30 minutes or?
No. 5 miles, I need an hour or something. I don't
Oh, okay.
time it. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have any records on that, or I don't take my time. I just do it for pleasure, basically. Just
Okay.
to let my thoughts run freely. And I mean, if there's no other way, I will use a treadmill. But other than that, whenever I get the chance, I go out and run through the fields, through the forest. That's what I like.
What
And I
about,
don't care about the weather. It can rain, snow. I don't care.
right. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. If I start this habit in Galway, I'm going to have to get used to running in the rain a lot, because there's heavy rainfall in this part of Ireland.
Yeah.
So yeah, just another question on this. What do you do in terms of footwear? Are you like a flat shoe, zero elevation type of person, or are you a running shoe with slight elevation on the heel, or how do you feel about footwear for running, that kind of thing?
For running,
Yeah, barefoot.
no, never barefoot. I like to train barefoot when I'm doing strength training, even when I'm doing some, I don't know, front squats or something when I'm training home.
Sure.
Leg extensions, I always try to not to wear shoes, which I can do in my home gym. That's no problem. When I'm running, what I'm doing is I'm going to a shop where they specialize in running equipment and get a recommendation. Have my my feet tested and my running. Then they're looking at you, how you're running, and what
Your
you're doing with
gates,
your
yeah.
hips and your knees and your wrists, your ankles, and everything. And then they recommend a certain shoe, and I've done quite well with that. So I couldn't even tell you what kind of a shoe it is, because I go by that recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I'm
So
sorry.
it's like that's okay. So it's a special running shoe based on gait analysis and
Yeah,
that type
yeah.
of thing. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fine. Just curious whether you were that's into that side of it, going, or the minimalist shoe, because a lot of people wear like the barefoot shoes, that type of thing.
I think that's basically, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Running barefoot.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so cool. So that's the routine, is it? So, and you mentioned it, sometimes you'll train 3 times a week. Is that because sometimes you'll do upper, lower, upper some
Yeah.
weeks, is it? Yeah.
Either that, or sometimes I might do, like, as I said, chest and back. Antagonistically, one set of chest, one set of back, and then another exercise for chest, another exercise. And then the second workout would be shoulders and arms. Or maybe I split it up like chest and triceps, chest, lateral shoulders, side shoulders, and triceps, back and biceps and legs. Legs is always by themselves.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I always try to failure. I cannot not train to failure, because I always want to know if I can do the next repetition. I've told myself so many times, don't train so intensely again. Because when I noticed that I started to have difficulty recovering, I told myself, okay, today, no going to failure. But then I go to failure again because I can't stop. I mean, why stop an exercise when you can, or when you think you can still do a rep?
Mm-hmm.
So
there's the research that the Jameses did on how we're really bad at predicting. Although we get better, you get better at predicting your. So I'm not sure if you were involved in that research, Jürgen. Actually, you were. Sorry.
Yeah, we were. We did it at my lab, actually.
Oh, right. Embarrassing.
No, that's fine. That's fine, because we always share our results and discuss it. And I love working with James and James. It's so great.
Well, he wrote so James Fisher wrote the forward to this as well, didn't he?
Mm-hmm,
so
he did.
Really, really nice.
Oh, yeah, that was great.
You know, he's just really hurt his. You know, he really hurt his knee recently. You know that?
No, I didn't. He told me. Oh, yeah, but we last talked. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, playing basketball. We did a podcast the other day on his whole plan around knee rehab.
Yeah, we talked about that. Oh, yeah.
So it's just a bit unfortunate for him, but he seems to be handling it really well. And that podcast will come out soon. Well, actually, by the time this is published, it will be out, so people will be able to listen to it. What else was I going to ask you quickly? So, okay, so you talked about the training. We talked about reps and reserve going to failure. All right, it's gone. I can't remember. No, but look, that is very interesting to hear you actually describe your routine, and it's quite inspiring, and it's definitely got me thinking about how I can change things up for me. Jürgen, I really appreciate your time today. Really great talking to you. So just in terms of your books, just for everyone listening or watching, I'm holding the book up to the camera. It's called Hit, New and Improved, High Intensity Training, How to Spend Less Time and Build More Muscle. I let Jürgen use my physique there, as you can see on the front of the book.
Yeah, I couldn't use myself because I'm too muscular. That would scare people off.
Exactly. It wouldn't be believable, would it? So, where can people pick up the book, Jürgen? Is it Amazon? I noticed it's
at Amazon. At the moment, it's only available as an ebook. We had a small limited number of printed books, but they sold out in no time, and now it's only available as an ebook.
Good for you, Jürgen. Oh, great! It's great to hear that, though. It's great to hear that. It's great to hear there's a lot of interest in your work, in this content specifically. So, well, I feel very fortunate that I got one of the physical copies. And we'll link it up in the show notes as well for people that want to, read the show notes and everything we mentioned today. I want to see the links there. Any final thoughts from yourself, Jürgen? Any words of wisdom regarding training or other for the listeners out there?
Yeah, but that's not something that your listeners would not already know, because there's one thing in fitness and training that I see all the time, and this is people look at somebody and they say, well, this person obviously doesn't know what he's talking about because he's not a 300-pound bodybuilder. When they want to know something, they walk up to the biggest guy in the gym and ask him how he got so big. And I like what you are doing because you really educate people on what we know. And because sometimes the 350-pound bodybuilder will not give you answers that are any beneficial for you. So that's funny. I once had the great opportunity to watch Usain Bolt train for a whole morning I think that was when he was preparing for the Olympic Games in London. And I saw him train and sprint and everything, and saw his trainer. And his trainer didn't look like he could run 100 meters at all. I mean, I think they would have to carry him 100 meters. But obviously he was he knew his stuff, because he advised, or he trained the fastest man in history. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I had to smile about, because if he was a bodybuilder, nobody would listen to him. because that's a funny thing that I always notice.
It's so prevalent still. And what was it like watching Usain Bolt train? What do you mean? You watched him strength train or
No,
train?
sprinting.
Sprinting. Okay. What
I
was
would
that?
have loved to see. It was
Rapid.
unbelievable because I was standing a few meters away from him, a few feet away from him, and he was sprinting and sprinting, and the speed. It's so your brain that can't comprehend that, because you see somebody sprinting like you've seen it 1,000 times, but this guy, he runs I think 46 kilometers an hour. That's what a car is allowed to do in the city. So you see a guy sprinting and he's going as fast as a car, and that's incredible.
That is incredible, isn't it? Wow,
that's
hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it's the fastest person I've ever seen, but obviously because he's the fastest person in history.
Yeah,
that was an incredible experience.
Yeah, generational talent, isn't it? Generational gift. Absolutely. I don't think anyone's come close. You know, you reminded me of something that McGuff actually said to me. I did a podcast a long time ago called "Why You Shouldn't Bulk Up." A lot, and it's very much, you know, echoing a lot of the stuff you said today. And I was going through a dilemma. I was going through really kind of a personal thing for me, where I was spending time with old friends, and I'd got really lean. And you know, it's funny, people that never knew me before, who obviously I come to Galway, I made a lot of new friends. So they just see me as like, you know, this pretty ripped, like, you know, lean, muscular dude, not, you know, overly muscular, but you know what I mean? And so they would just think, I look in good shape or whatever. But a lot of my friends from home saw me go kind of shrink, because they saw me when I was, you know, a little chubbier when I went to university and that kind of thing. So they started getting concerned about like my weight and this sort of thing. And I got loads of comments, like loads of people say, "Lawrence, you're too, you know," because I was probably like similar body fat percentage to you maybe at that time. Probably a little bit over that now. I'm probably closer to like, I don't know, 13-14% right now, maybe a bit more. And I had a bit of a, you know, personal kind of dilemma about it. And I felt very insecure. And I said to Doug, I had a big long conversation with him about, you know, the pros and cons of bulking up. And he pretty much, I won't go into it here, he pretty much echoed everything you said. And obviously listeners can go and listen to that. I'll link it up in the show notes. But anyway, I think it was during that podcast, he basically said, you know, just what you said there, like sometimes you're better off listening to the person who actually looks the worst in terms of physique. And you're probably going to get better advice from them. So if you take two people at once, they've both been training all their lives, but one's got like, you know, a really, you know, subpar physique and the other one's got a wonderful physique, you're probably better off listening to the person who's got the worst physique of the two. And I just thought that was really interesting. Just really kind of echoes what you're saying there, reinforces it. Because it's so much of that is out of one's control, isn't it? It's just their genetic response to training. Doesn't matter what they do, you know? So I'll link that up in the show notes as well. So Jürgen, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation as always.
Thank you.
It was a really good kind of retraining for me on a few aspects, which I found very useful. And again, so if you're listening to this or watching this, I'm holding up the book again. Go and check it out. Go and buy a copy. It's just ebook at the moment, and that's called Hit New and Improved High Intensity Training: How to Spend Less Time and Build More Muscle by Jürgen Giessing. And to get the show notes for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 435. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. Welcome to another episode brought to you by Imagine Strength, the future of safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Are you a HIIT studio owner looking for equipment that's not just top-notch, but also tailored to your specific needs? Imagine Strength is your answer. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength is revolutionizing the HIIT industry with their state-of-the-art yet affordable equipment. Their team doesn't just sell HIIT equipment, they live and breathe it. I've personally experienced their gear at the Resistance Exercise Conference, and let me tell you, it was an intense workout that I won't soon forget, in the best way possible, of course. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they provide customized solutions for HIIT studios. Number two, they have budget-friendly yet high-performance designs. And number three, they're committed to innovation and excellence in high-intensity training specifically. Founder Jeff Turner and his dedicated team are on a mission to make HIIT accessible to everyone. Getting started is easy. Number 1, visit imaginestrength.com. Number 2, consult with their expert team. And number 3, choose the equipment that will skyrocket your business. Don't wait. Head over to imaginestrength.com and elevate your HIIT studio today with Imagine Strength.